Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us in this event promoted by the Barcelona Time Use Initiative for a Healthy Society. The goal of this event is to discuss about how work-related policies and practices are changing as a reaction to the impact of COVID-19, and it also aims at drafting potential directions towards permanent changes beyond COVID-19 in the way we regulate work. These days, we have just seen how, due to the restrictions on mobility, the representatives of the restaurants and hospitality business sector actively promoted a change in lunch and dinner hours to adjust them to the permitted opening hours. And most of us are still experiencing some challenges and struggles linked to the remote work prescribed by avoiding social contact. It seems that many of these experiences are contingent and are directly related with the pandemic. Without a doubt, this contingency has been and is still being an opportunity to rethink things. The forms of work organization, the formulas for managing teams and their dedication, or in general, the space that productive activity occupies in our lives in relation to other human activities, and its impact on our personal balance, not only in terms of economics, but also from a physical and emotional health point of view. To address these and other issues, we have a stunning panel of speakers. We are pleased to have with us three powerful women: Esther Lynch, Deputy General Secretary of the European Trade Union Confederation. She's going to give us a brief overview of key concerns from trade union on how governments and the European Union is reacting to COVID crisis. Mariluz Vega, advisor at the International Labour Organization. She's going to give us an overview on being observed by the organization in terms of work-related policies and key areas on which further changes on regulation are expected. And Charlotte Lochart, CEO at 4-Day Week Global, that is going to give us an explanation of the 4-Day Week and how its proposal can support new ways of organizing work time on the current crisis. I think Esther Lynch is going to start. So for being with us, and you have the floor.
Thank you, and thanks for the invitation. What an interesting discussion, because I'm here in my kitchen, and I think a lot of people are in the same situation, in that the way in which we're using our time and the place in which we are going to work from has changed so much in the time of COVID. I mean, one of the things that struck me about this time is that for many years, I've been an advocate for putting more control in the hands of working people, more time sovereignty in the hands of working people, so that they can better manage and get on with their lives. And I think what the major lesson of COVID is that teleworking was a lot more possible than many employers claim. So for a long period of time, employers said this is way too complicated. We can't really trust people to do their work, and therefore telework isn't for us. So I think the question has been asked and answered. Telework for an awful lot of jobs is possible. But the reality is a bit more complicated than that as well, because I realize, like, I live alone, so I can work anywhere in my house. I'm not interfering with anybody else, and nobody else is putting pressure on my time here. But I know that's not the reality for a lot of workers. I go to meetings where I'm speaking to union members, and I can see quite clearly that some people are sitting on the bed, that they're in some corner of a room somewhere, and then there's also children and other housemates or other members of their family who are in and around the environment. And I think that's one of the big issues, is that telework is a very different experience if you have a spacious home, if you don't have other pulls on your time, and if you can control when your meetings are not happening. So I do want to recognise that telework is not a universally good experience, and that's before we even begin to talk about the situation where workers are in situations of domestic violence, and in which case the home can be a very dangerous place for them, and then spending all of the time at home teleworking. The other issue that's coming up a lot that workers are raising with us is the triple duty that women are facing. So it's having to do your job, having to take care of the home, and then thirdly, having to school the children. And you would have hoped in 2020 that burden would have been more shared, but all of the research is showing that hasn't been more shared. And certainly, if you look at something as simple as the number of academic papers that have been written during 2020, the number of academic papers by men and the number of academic papers by women, the number of academic papers by men is much higher. And I think what that is the tip of the iceberg example of how women have had the burden, the triple day of work, schooling the children, doing their day of work, and taking place of the home place, which is the workplace. The other very linked issue is the right to disconnect. Now, what I want to say about this is that it is not the case that there's no law relating to the right to disconnect in Europe, because there's working time rules in Europe. So it's very clear that employers can't expect workers to be available morning, noon, and night, and can't expect them to keep checking their emails or their phones 24/7. That there's maximum working hours, and they have to be respected, and all working time has to be recorded. So all working time has to be recorded and has to be paid. And we know that particularly because of cases taken by our Spanish colleagues. So the problem of the current COVID situation is that there has been a blurring of time sovereignty, in that there is a management by objectives. So workers are requested to complete a certain amount of work within a day or a week, and the employer being quite comfortable, even if the worker is having to do that work with, say, between 7 p.m. and midnight. And we're getting quite concerned about that, because it's not acceptable that people are working a day that starts at 9 a.m. and finishes at 12 midnight, even if it has some breaks in the middle of it. So there is a great deal of concern among workers and trade unions in relation to the length of the working day now, and the expectation that simply because you're working at home that you're always available, or that you should always have your laptop or phone on. That all of those circumstances are clearly unacceptable and contrary to EU working time rules. And really what this calls for is a lot more trust from employers in relation to their workers, a lot less intrusive surveillance. We've seen a lot of very inappropriate surveillance where every keystroke is being looked at and managed, and if people stop even for a couple of minutes, they get some prompt from the employer to say, we noticed that you're not typing anymore. What's going on? And because people need to be able to respond to events that are happening in their home, and so this constant surveillance and the fear of being surveilled and the lack of control that workers report over the surveillance So one of the things we are looking for is that workers would be told there would be a warning, if you like, that they are being surveilled, and that at all times the workers should be able to turn off that surveillance, because after all it is their own home, and so they should be able to end that. I think then the other major development in the arena of time use has been the growing interest that in the recovery, so in the future world after COVID, that there would be a development of the 4-day week or the reduced working time approach. And we have seen a number of unions lead collective agreements, such as an IG Metall, beginning to look at that, to have a clear mandate from the membership to begin to negotiate that. Looking at reduced working time without a reduction in productivity, or a reduced working time, a reduction in the amount of work that's being done, but a sharing of the costs of that, so that the worker isn't down a whole day of pay. And we see different collective agreements dealing with that quite differently. Our view is that coming out of the crisis, workers want to see, will not be satisfied with going back to what we had before the crisis, that they want to see a better vision for the future, and that better vision for the future needs to also address issues such as climate change. Reducing working time can have a real benefit, both in terms of how long it takes you to get to the office, but if the whole building is closed down for a whole day, that also has savings, a climate change saving. The other point about the working time, and I realize I'm out of time now, but the only final point I wanted to make is that all too often the common day off is ignored, and there's a large body of research now that demonstrates that families being able to have the same day off, communities being able to have the same day off, allows for a development of voluntary work, of games, of sports, and so part of the consideration about working time also needs to be a common day off. So, in a nutshell, three mega trends: one, telework, and the working day related to telework. It's good things, it's good points. It's challenges. The second point then being the reduction in the working week, in working time, without a loss of productivity and without a loss of pay. And then thirdly, the need to put back on the table the idea of a common day off, so that would help families and communities to be able to be to have a vibrant social and civic infrastructure. So thank you.
We cannot hear you. The mute, always.
Yep.
No, I cannot hear.
I cannot hear either. Can you hear? I can hear you.
I can hear Charlotte, and I was hearing Esther, but not you. The other Esther, the Catalan one, if I can say. I cannot hear you.
Technology.
It's technology, it's one of the risks.
I know. Isn't it interesting? We've been using it for so long now and we still have problems.
It's great and has risk.
Yes. I wonder if the audience can hear us.
I imagine.
Maybe the kindest thing to do would be for the second speaker to begin. I
Yes.
don't know.
But if we don't know the audience is following us, sir, I don't know if maybe with the comment in the chat. Let me see here. Could you hear me? If you, yeah, I can start if you don't, no problem. I was not sure you can follow me, but anyway, if you want, I can say something about. Well, I can start in this end. Well, first of all, good afternoon, buena tarde. Then I would like to talk a little bit about which is the concept and the changes that we have observed from the International Labour Organization concerning working time, in particular after this COVID pandemic affecting all of us, I would say already for more than 7 months. We know all that need of time is a human constraint. And even the Article 24 of the Human Rights Declaration is quite clear, recognizing the right to rest, free time, a limit working time, and even including a paid holiday. We can say that working time or time in general is part of our lives, and human beings are organized on social times. I say we have the times, the times that we need to use for different issues. The limitation of working time has been supported, has been the main origin of some of the legislation. In fact, even ILO legislation, one of the first 4 conventions in 1919 that the ILO produced was related to working time, related already to the limit working time, and was supported by health issues. Nothing is more related today with the pandemic than health issues. Working time and health issues are parallel. What can say that when we talk about working time, we are talking in a nutshell of the origin of also the need of having a legislation around labor law. Today, the discussion on working time is going a little bit farther, if not even farther, the limitation of the working time, because it's even conceived as an element of social inclusion. We cannot talk about, I say, we need to consider that working time allows people to be more included, and also is a concept that is related to equality. Only to make an example, the precarity, all the precarious contract usually result in excessive working time. Is part of the issues that we are facing. The changes in the world of work affect mainly the working time arrangement today, expanding the concept of working time and in some way covering issues that has been conceived until now only like part of a private life. Was mentioned before by Esther, the idea that we are all combining private life with public life, with professional life, and all is mixed. We need to control, we need to know how to do it, and this is extremely complicated. The time sovereignty, that is a very Anglo-Saxon concept that just appeared in French and in Spanish, very related to the ILO, by the way, because we were not using this terminology. We were not using la souveraineté du temps or la soberanía del tiempo. We were using more the idea of time management. Was this concept is opening a new idea of how we need to deal with our working time, and is a global vision in line with the challenges that the society 24 hours 7 is putting in face of our lives, in particular after the pandemic. The ILO has been, as I have mentioned before, mentioning and regulating the question of working time for a long time ago. But I think the concept that was included in the discussion of the future of work in 2019 in particular in the recommendation made by the ILO Global Commission on the Future of Work, include this concept of time sovereignty like one of the investment that are needed to build a human-centered agenda. We cannot invest in, we cannot work without not investing in really a better regulation of working time. This idea implies, in some way, a new holistic and a broader vision of the fundamental right that is my right to rest and my right to health at work. Expanding time sovereignty implies that workers in general need greater autonomy over their working time while meeting enterprise needs, and they need to allow people to have this balance that was already mentioned between work and personal life, and in a way can afford or can permit the work that he can realize this, the personal goal as person, but also the goals that are needed to be fulfilled at the professional level. We need, of course, to continue our efforts to implement and to regulate maximum limit on working time, but of course, alongside measures to improve productivity that Esther was mentioning, but we need, in any case, to guarantee our guarantee that create this real choice for flexibility. We cannot ignore that all these challenges need some different approaches. It is clear that today we are experiencing all these changes that has been appearing in the last 20 years in a very, I would say, massive way. There are changes on the production process. There are also changes in the economical activity related, for example, to the supply chains that are changing all the time, the offshoring, and also we have big changes in the structure and composition of the workforce. And all this is making us to think in which way we need to regulate all this process in relation to the working time. The new circumstances, the economic and new and productive new circumstances, they are calling for a new way to deal with the working time. But this doesn't mean that to have new ways to do it doesn't imply that we will have less guarantees. And this is the difficulty. There are already some forms that we have been dealing with, like the irregular distribution of the working time during the day or during the week, the famous hour banks or days bank that allows some flexibility. But the question is how to regulate this and to protect workers to have a real, I would say, decision on this. Then only to tell that we need really to have to have this flexibility and to have a regulation, in particular, if it's possible, through the collective bargaining process, using another fundamental rights to allow to make compatible the idea of a new way of dealing with the working time. We are facing new challenges, but we need to ensure the same rights. Human beings need at least to be protected, and at work and in general terms. Then this is one of the issues that we need to face, and the pandemic is putting us in a very urgent way to deal with this working time, and it's very important for the ILO to really define and to regulate this new concept of time sovereignty in a context that is completely different. Thank you.
Thank you, Mariluz. We are gathering all the ideas that you have put on the table. The moment we start with the debate with all the participants in this event, and now is the turn for Charlotte Lockhart. So, Charlotte, you have the floor.
So for me, it's good morning, everyone. It's I'm in New Zealand, the land where we have almost very little COVID, and I send you all my warm welcomes. So the interesting thing from my perspective on the use of time is that, of course, we have been talking about reducing work hours since before COVID, and COVID has just given us another layer of ways of dealing with that, but also problems to solve to create it. And so while we call ourselves the 4-day week, really what we're talking about is how do we reduce the working week in terms of the number of hours that we work. For some businesses, the reality of actually closing the door of their business for a whole day isn't a reality in terms of the way the business needs to operate. So we know that the way we were working prior to COVID and the way that we are working now isn't fit for our purposes, for our people, for our business, and for our entire society. And we need to make a change. And that existed before COVID and it exists now. So what we talk about when we're discussing the 4-day week is how does business take responsibility for this? If it accepts that the work has lost its place in our people's lives, I often say to people, as employers, we need to remember that we borrow our people from their lives, and work has slipped into the wrong place, and it did it before COVID, and it is doing it now because we don't turn off. And the perpetrator of that is the laptop and the smartphone. So we are always on. We are always able to be connected. When we brought in the 40-hour work week and across the Western world, that has come in at slightly different times, but broadly at the same time in history. In general, our society was constructed slightly differently. Usually it was the father that went out to work and the mother was the one that stayed home and took care of the family. And then when father came home at the end of the day, he was able to enjoy his time with his family, and also the same thing with the weekend and also on family holidays. Now, of course, with the way that our society is constructed, where mum works too, and we have all of this technology that means that we are constantly on and no one is truly away from work. And so how do we accept that this is not the way we want to construct ourselves moving forward, and how do we change that? And so business needs to be working with its partners. It needs to be working with its worker representatives, so whether that be unions or other organisations. And it needs to be working with its own people directly. And so what we recommend with the 4-day week and in the way that we suggest businesses deal with this is that they actually have an honest conversation with their staff around what productivity truly is. Now, the advantage for business, it gets much better productivity measures. It is clear about how it is going to measure the productivity that it deems to be the reason and what it needs to get out of a work week or a work day or a work year. And once you've defined those, and lots of businesses, most businesses around the world actually don't have really good productivity measures. And without those measures, it's very hard to trust your people. Now, COVID has sent us all home and has forced trust on a lot of employers. And we need to take that skill and that present that we have been given by this very awful thing that has hit our planet. And we need to say, right, well, so with that trust and with that understanding of how productivity might work in our business, how do we enhance that to create the new workplace? And what works most successfully is when businesses sit down with their employees and say, please help us solve this problem. We want to have a business that remains as productive, but we want you to work less hours. And this collaborative approach between employer and employees is actually the way that this is achieved. And it's achieved successfully and it's achieved sustainably. And so we have a principle at 4-Day Week Global. We call it the 100-80-100 principle. We want to see 100% pay for 80% time, as long as 100% productivity, whether that be outcome or output, is achieved. And so with 100-80-100, business still gets what it needs. The employees get to work less time and they get to continue to have their full pay. And why shouldn't they? They should have full pay. because the business is getting full productivity. But the curious fact that sits out there is that when businesses do this, they get more than 100% productivity. So this is actually a really good thing for businesses to do. Most businesses that take on a 4-day week, whether it be a 32-hour work week across 5 days or however they do it, those who measure it report findings of these more than 20% increase. In fact, the best example is Microsoft Japan, who last summer ran a 4-day week trial and had a 39.9, so let's face it, nearly 40% uptick in their productivity. And they did it by doing 3 really simple things that, yes, they did it by doing 3 really simple things at work. And I challenge you to do this. No more than 5 people in a meeting, no meetings more than 30 minutes, and use the technology wisely. So I challenge you out there. We can do this, business and society and the worker unions or worker support places. We can work together on this. Let's not fight each other. Let's fix it.
Thank you so much, Charlotte. And well, actually, thank you so much for all of your reflections. Now we invite our audience to pose their questions. We still have some minutes left, so let's friendly squeeze our speakers. While the questions are coming, I'm going to break the ice with one. Mariluz, you were saying that we need new approaches to deal with this issue of working time and working organization. The point is, of course, which those approaches are, and especially how to persuade all the stakeholders that are not currently into these new approaches. And I'm speaking, of course, especially of the employers, the companies, especially, well, of course, we all of us, we are struggling, but how to convince, how to persuade all the managers and directors who now are overwhelmed with this situation in a moment especially tough because, well, we have in front of us an economic crisis due to the COVID, and this crisis put in risk lots of business. So how to deal with this dilemma? What your ideas are about this?
I think I have mentioned a little bit that there are nothing better than what is the social dialogue, even if it sounds very rhetoric. I think what I would say even more is what we need is collective bargaining, but I would not like to force to the detail of a collective bargaining, but nothing is more flexible and more adaptable than the negotiation as such. I say when we are living in a future of work that is today a present of work, and everything is changing at a speed that is impossible to catch up with, the only possibility is to sit down and to try to understand each other and to try to see which are the possible arrangements. For me, this is the only quick solution that we can have. On the basis of the experience of what is this dialogue, I talk about collective bargaining because for me is what idea, but we can look for other kind of more softer approaches of discussion if it's impossible to go for a more formal source, in particular in some countries. I think this will give us the basis for a learning process for a new regulation. Because as I say, there are many issues that are behind, and in particular these health issues that we need to consider. Also the conciliation is an issue, is a key issue. Esther was talking about to work in the kitchen and working in a bedroom. We are 3 in this house working in different bedrooms. And this need to be handled in some way. And employers are realistic because they are also working at home with the machine, and they are suffering also some constraint. Then the only way is sit, talk, and agree. This is called at the low level collective bargaining, but we can talk about social dialogue in general for not being so pushy, even though collective bargaining is a human labor right.
Okay, thank you. We've talked about future trends and current concerns, which already triggered new or renewed practices on how we organize work. Which of the things that are currently being applied you think will stay in the future? Because I'm not sure if we can speak about telework as the telework we want for the future. If we think of what we've been doing during this remote work in emergency. So, of course, we've been teleworking, but how do you think, or what do you think that it's going to be stuck in this emergency situation? And what are the things that we could uh, keep for the future?
So can I?
Yes.
So on the telework, Eurofound did research and asked employees all over Europe, will you want to keep teleworking after the crisis? And 2/3 of them said yes, but not all the time. So they said they want to be able to do telework, but they want to be able to mix it so have some time in the workplace and some time at home. And I think that is an important point, that the moves from some employers to say we're simply going to do telework from now on, there isn't going to be an actual workplace, isn't what people are asking for. What they are asking for is the flexibility. What we're particularly concerned about is how some of, we say, lead voices in business have said that what they want to do is to say you can work anywhere in the world on telework, but we'll pay you according to whatever country you're in. And so we can't have a situation where telework is used as a new form of discrimination between workers. We had to stamp that out for part-time work. We had to stamp that out for fixed-time work. You know, we can already stamp it out, be very clear that simply because you're on telework doesn't mean that you get less pay or worse conditions of employment. That development we absolutely have to stamp out very quickly. And I think what's also interesting is that a lot of unions talking to me about the right to return to the workplace. So after COVID, that people want the choice. So I think that very often, Charlotte, the employers, a lot of the employers I deal with when they're talking about flexibility are not thought leaders like yourself. What they're actually talking about is that they want that the employee is kept in extreme insecurity, and that they don't know day to day, week to week, how many hours of work they will get, and they have to wait until they get a message on their phone to tell them, you have an hour of work tomorrow, you have a day's work tomorrow, or you have a week's work tomorrow. So I think that extreme insecurity has played out very badly in the COVID situation. So I think after COVID, I think we're going to experience a lot more demands from workers. Yes, for flexibility, but flexibility in the hands of workers, and for a lot less insecurity in terms of predictability of working schedules and of income and social security rights into the future. I think they're the mega trends that are going to be coming out at the end of COVID.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Esther. You also mentioned all the women's issue regarding COVID and lockdown. You mentioned how women had to work, do the house, tidying up and housekeeping and schooling children. So how do you think we need to approach women's discrimination once we've seen that they have been the one of the more affected employees during the COVID. So should we establish specific rules just for protecting them, or how do you think we can manage it?
I think the lesson of COVID in particular for work that's predominantly done by women is also important. So I'd like to say a bit about that as well, is that if you look at the frontline workers, the carers, the cleaners, the people working in retail, all predominantly women, and very often on very low wages, often minimum wages. And what we see as what needs to come out of what has happened during the crisis is that those workers who showed up put their lives at risk. We cannot call people essential workers and then only pay them minimum wages. So what we need to do is to reevaluate work that's predominantly done by women. And that's why we think it's really important that the EU Commission brings forward in the Pay Transparency Directive legal provisions that will allow us to deal with work of equal value, so that we can, so that it can no longer be the case that simply because the job title is one that's normally associated with men and a job title with work that's normally associated with women justifies a lower rate of pay. So that's one of the one of the major angers about the visible injustice associated with COVID has been the low pay of essential workers, many of them predominantly women. I think that then the second issue relating to working time for people on telework, I think to some extent the homeschooling was something, or is something that we need to take a broader societal approach to. So it has to be the case that we all share the costs. So in the same way as we share the costs of parental leave, we share the costs of maternity leave. What we need to think about is more creatively is about sharing the costs of the time associated with homeschooling under COVID as well. So the search is on for a tripartite solution to those questions. But to some extent, I mean, it has to be full credibility for workers and their unions and those employers who sat down exactly as the two other speakers said, and said, we have a problem, you know, how do we work together towards finding a solution that works for everybody? So I can only underscore the points that the other speakers have made about that, which is about doing it, you know, finding solutions together to save lives, to save jobs, to save incomes, and to do it together.
Okay, thank you. So beyond regulation in terms of practices, which do you think that is the way to introduce good practices in terms of time use to the companies? Charlotte, for instance.
Oh, you want me to answer that? Sorry, yes. So yes, look, there are so many ways that we can work within our businesses to make things better for our people and also for the business. And when we recognise that business continues to need to have its productivity levels at the level that we want, and we want business being successful, it's part of the way we're going to recover economically post this crisis. We need business to be successful. We need taxes to be paid so that we can continue to be the generous and kind-hearted societies that we want. But I think I just want to pick up on one of Esther's points around the casualisation of the workforce with people not being certain about their hours, and that's incredibly wrong. wrong. Andrew and I are huge anti-gig economy advocates. And what I struggle with sometimes is when people start talking about reduced hour working and flexible working, and they're effectively talking about creating a gig economy, and that is not what we talk about at all. We firmly believe, avidly believe, that this is about giving workers the protection that they deserve. When you put a job into gig, not only do you give uncertainty around hours, but you take away all of those worker benefits, the holiday, sick pay, maternity leave, all of the things, superannuation, all the things that we as a kind and generous society have decided are important to us. And this is seen, I mean, very fortunately, of course, Europe is a lot more advanced with this than the likes of the US. We see dreadful stories come out of the US in terms of the way that the workforce has gone, where there are very few worker protections. I remember hearing a podcast where a woman on the podcast said, well, I'm not sure I really believe in paid maternity leave. And that's a part of the psychology that they have in America. And we see in the elections where California voted to that Uber and Lyft drivers were not employees, that they were contractors. And by doing that, they pull the rug out immediately from underneath those workers around their ability to have the protections that being called a worker gives us. And so if we accept that business and its people need to work together to create a homogenous whole, and then obviously government coming in and being part of that conversation, then we allow the flexibility for one business to actually work with its people to find the sweet spot that gives the productivity, the worker protection, and maintaining income. Because what we don't want is for people's incomes to feel like they are under threat. But they do when they are not empowered as part of the decision-making process in terms of how a business is going to be productive. And so when we talk about the 4-day week, we actually say you have to hand the entire process to your people, because they are the ones that get the benefit of the time off. So they will find ways to make your business more productive. And this is good for you as a business owner or a business leader, because then you are truly working together. Now, there are lots of employers out there, lots of them, who don't think this, and who think that they can just use their people for their own gain, and they try and win all of the time. But there are lots of employers who think differently. And what we need to be doing is encouraging those employers, because what will happen is employees will be able to vote with their feet, and they will go and work for the good employers. And they need to be encouraged. It was quite interesting. I was in Ireland before COVID, and we're talking about this. And Ireland, at that time, as you're probably aware, had almost full employment. And one woman said to me, "Oh, that's fine, but I don't think my company will allow this." And I said, "Go work for someone else." And so what we want to try and do is create a world where we do that. And I often talk, so I'm talking a lot. I talk with a lot of women leaders around the world, and I say, you must put this in place. You must lead. You must negotiate this for your people, with your people. And as a business leader, if you're an employee, you must negotiate this for yourself. Because the care worker, the hospitality worker, the cleaner of your office, she is not going to get this unless you start asking for it and saying, I will not be paid less because I am working less hours. We do it every time we return from parental leave, and we work 4 days and get paid 80%. Stop it. Be paid for what you produce. If you're producing 100% of your workload in a shorter period of time, be paid for the workload, not the time. And then those conversations will start to trickle down to the person who cleans your office. And we have to take responsibility for that. and we have to grow up. Does that sound like me being a mother of a teenager?
Thank you. Well, actually, we have a question which wants to go to dive deep into this. Anna Gines is asking, is this principle 180-100 not available in some companies or sectors? She's thinking about companies open to the public, probably less working time implies in less sales. And she says, furthermore, it's impossible to introduce in these sectors work is overworked. Generally speaking, is this debate I am in favor possible in a context where we still have a problem of excessive work? Thank you.
Okay, so this is it's a really key point actually, because actually around the world there is every sort of business that you can imagine is doing a reduced hour work week. And when you collaborate with your people as a business owner, collaborate with your people, you will find the way to reduce worker hours and maintain pay. Now, there is, I have one condition that we do actually understand that in the COVID world, we do have businesses that are truly struggling to pay their people. And we have to, as we recover from COVID, we will need to be generous in terms of how we work together to keep business alive and not have businesses fail because of the economy that they find themselves in. But if you're working in a business like that, then work with your employer to understand what does a return to full pay look like once you've returned to full productivity. But it's really key for businesses to understand that this is something that you work together on. So it doesn't really matter what the time is. How many times you talk about, reducing hours might reduce sales, for example. But how many times have you walked into a shop to buy some clothes and you've virtually been ignored by the staff that are there? There are sales that are being missed because people don't have the right training, they don't have the right motivation, and they don't have the right support from their employers, or they're just the wrong people in the job. And so it's actually about understanding how we pull those levers to increase those sales. I talk at a time when Andrew and I were in a shop and he wanted to buy a pair of jeans. There were 3 staff members talking and none of them helped us. And we walked out without making a single purchase. And he would have bought 4 pairs of that same jean if he'd found it. So it's about understanding our people, understanding what motivates them. But often we can't work that out. Business leaders are really good at deciding what is good for their people. But actually, the only people who know what is good for them are their people. So work together to find out the solutions. My 4-day week will not look like your 4-day week. It can only be established by us working together to find something that works for both the company and the people. Go work for a company that wants to do that process. And the companies that don't, let them struggle. Let them find that they need to change because they can't get the right people.
Thank you. We have 6 minutes left. We were just talking before starting the event about optimism and pessimism about all these changes. So just for finishing the event, could you please, all of you, just send a view of how do you see the future and what things do you think that from an optimistic point of view, if possible, that can help everybody of us to move forward these changes? So, Mariluz, your last words.
I can be the first. It's always, we're all women. This is a pleasure. We don't need to use all topics for this kind of things. Then only to tell them I would say, an optimistic with limits, a bound optimistic, in terms that I think we are learning not for the future. We have learned for the present. Then it's not anymore to talk about future. It's to talk about the present. And present is facing, as I say, is making us to take decision and to argue, to move and to work on the issues of working time. This is key, and I think again this is quite important because working conditions are in the center of the debate again. There were a moment that working conditions were not so important in the debate. We were talking about other issues, more about flexibility of employment and other issues. Now, working conditions are key. Then this is already some positive aspect and we need to deal with. And on another basis, I say we are learning a lot in terms of how we need to conceive and how we need to prepare policies and to deal with the new challenges. Besides this, I am a little bit pessimistic that we can run at the speed that is really needed, because it's true that we need to work together, but work together needs time. And I'm not sure we have really the time to deal with the issues. But let's open the mind, and maybe this time we can really learn and apply the result of this learning. I think it's a process of doing by learning or learning by doing both. Then let's be optimistic that probably we will have new regulation that will be flexible with guarantees.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Well, it reminded me, yesterday I was speaking with a Scrum Master. He was telling me about all the agile methodologies and so on. And he was saying that they don't speak about time anymore. They speak about difficulty, and this makes things flow quicker. So, well, I don't know if this is a good a piece of advice, or on the opposite, if we don't speak about time but just about difficulty, it's going to keep us blinded. But well, anyway, so Esther, your optimistic or your pessimistic view on things?
I am 100% optimistic, and I tell you why. Because 100 years ago, the response to the Spanish flu that killed so many people around the world was the first ILO convention dealing with working time. So 8 hours work, 8 hours rest, 8 hours play. So I'm confident that coming out of this crisis, all those workers who turned up, put their lives at risk to make sure to help each other, that sticking together, we can really create the type of change so that we can have the type of world of work that we want. And exactly this, that finally to see at the end of this 100 years, so 100 years later, with our pandemic, in response to our pandemic recession, that what we see coming out of this is improved working conditions. And as I said, the reason I'm optimistic is 100 years ago, our grandparents and our great-grandparents did it. And our grandchildren and great-grandchildren need us to similarly step up to the mark and to deliver better working conditions, a shorter, fairer working week for everybody. And I think we can do it.
Okay, thank you. And Charlotte?
So I refuse to be a pessimist, although I have to say I do worry that people will be lazy. Management at its heart is actually quite lazy. That's why we don't all work a 4-day week now, because managers are effectively too lazy to put in a process that increases their productivity and reduces their work hours. So that gives me the pessimism, but I refuse to be pessimistic. I do believe that we are at we've been talking about the future of work for so long now. It is here. The future work is now, is today, and we have to stop talking about it and we have to start doing some things about it. And there are lots of clever minds out there, and there are two of the lovely ladies who've joined me today that form part of that conversation. And it's not that hard. We can make this work. We just need to get off our tushes and get out of our chairs and actually start doing some things about it. I said before and earlier on, we need to remember that we borrow our people from their lives. That's a very important part of us. And we've forgotten that with our cell phones and with our laptops. And I'll leave you with another line that I like to use, that if we are not reimagining the future, we are just re-engineering the past.
Okay, thank you. So, well, time, it's clear that it's not money, it's life. So we have no option than being alive. So with this call to action, we've already reached the end of our event. Thank you very much to all attendees for having followed us, and many thanks to the speakers for their availability and your generosity for sharing this space of reflection with us. We hope that all this energy will be transformed into action and tangible results, with which indeed we will be much healthier and happier and more active societies. Thank you so much.
Moltes gràcies.
And have a good evening.
Thank you very much.
Moltes gràcies. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.